have the end of the conference right at 3 o'clock. So I'm kind of like at the end of the entire conference, which is a good thing because I think y'all sort of be patient and also be this can be an interactive experience. My name is Jimmy Anderson. I am currently I work at the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm an Air Force veteran. Served both enlisted and served as an officer. And I'm still a reservist where I serve as an intel officer at the Pentagon. But my full-time job is working at the VA. I work as a political appointee and special assistant to the secretary. But all that stuff we'll talk a little bit about that. But I want to I really started off there because I want to sort of communicate how your sort of profiles and the work that you all have done is not far away from anything that I've been able to do. And when we start talking about study abroad opportunities or sort of, your prestigious fellowships and scholarships, a lot of folks think that those scholarships are sort of unachievable, right? I mean, how many people, raise your hand if you ever looked at a scholarship or fellowship and you said, there's no way I should even put my name forward, by show of hands, right? We've all had that. And we've all put in many of those scholarship applications and gotten turned down as well, right? So, and I say gotten because I'm from South Carolina, so just give me that. That's okay. University of South Carolina, that's right. So let's start working through this. So the Fullbright U.S. student program is what I'm primarily here to talk about. But I even want to put the umbrella over it as study abroad opportunities overall for veterans. And there's a lot of work and we need good student veterans who are willing to take those chances, go out on that limb with your brand and with your personal story, and be able to apply for a lot of those opportunities. So that's why I'm here as Jimmy Anderson, as well as Kyle, who's with the, go ahead, we'll kind of do that towards it. He's with the Institute of International Education, which is sort of the administered arm that takes a lot of these federally funded opportunities and gets them to a lot of the students, in this case, student veterans. So let's start moving through here. Okay. So I just want to do this at the start here. I want each person, if you could, just for a second, no longer than a minute, please. But if you could just take each one of these questions. Have you ever studied abroad outside of your military service? If someone is able to say yes to that and would like to stand up and just tell me about if they've studied abroad, if they've studied abroad outside of their military service, or actually, I think we should do it for this one. Maybe a show of hands for folks who haven't been able to study abroad, so who have not studied abroad outside of their military service. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and I was in that camp as well. Okay, what are your interests? These are some of the things that as we start to work through this, as I've tried to make a lot of these presentations unique to us as student veterans, because we have a very unique experience. And so some of these questions I think are really important. What are your interests? If you are getting your degree right now and it's in clinical psychology, or if you're working on your master's or PhD, that's you're gonna approach these opportunities in a little different way. If you're a political science and a political nerd like myself, then you're gonna approach it in a different way as well. But the thing about Fullbright, as we'll talk about, is that it is really an opportunity for all types of folks, right? So all different backgrounds, cultures, as well as different research interests, particularly in the U.S. Fullbright, U.S. student program. And then the third thing is what is your personal story? I know we've had some presentations around storytelling. If you had the opportunity to sit in it, my good friend Maureen gave that, talked about storytelling in your elevator pitch and really sort of digging in deep and thinking about you and where you stand at in the world. And I really had to do a little bit of that as I started to go forward with Fullbright. It wasn't just like a regular old scholarship that you apply for. You really have to sit back and look at yourself and say, what have I done? Where am I at? Where do I want to go? Those are a lot of those things, and your personal story is really important to that. Fourth thing is, what phase are you in your life? Are you transitioning out of the military and you're a new student veteran? Okay, well then we have to figure out when the right time is to pursue a Fulbright. Are you, transitioning to, public service where you want to have a career in the federal government, and that's something you always wanted to do? Fulbright might be an opportunity for you. And then your research interests, and it could be you're pursuing a PhD right now, and a lot of people don't think that because you're a PhD student or a master's student that you could still pursue a Fulbright. That's not true. You can. I was a master's student who pursued a Fulbright. So, all right. So let's move to. All right, where am I pointing it at? Help. Where am I pointing this? Oh, there we go. Oh, goodness. Oh, man, that was a lot. Okay. All right, so cool. Okay, so that's me, and I don't like to be pretentious, but that is my background. I'm an Air Force veteran. I spent a lot of time in the veteran space before I went into the administration, and I started up a Veterans Alumni Council at the University of South Carolina, go Gamecocks. And I also worked a lot in this sort of national security and foreign policy space. So as you start to look at that, it's not for me, it's really for you all to think about like where you're at right now and how you want to take what you're doing right now and maybe pursue a Fulbright based off of where you are now. So, okay. Fullbright Program, just a little bit of sort of the basics here. Created in 1946, the famous Senator William Fullbright, who's the great senator of Arkansas, was, if anyone is a political nerd, then you would know about his sort of his history of wanting to create a program where they can send students on an international exchange, and really this program is a flagship program, right? So it is really the first of its kind as far as federally funded grant that's provided to students, that's provided to folks to go and pursue an international exchange. There's a lot of things. When I start to talk about political stuff, my brain goes in like 20 different directions. So if you're like that, then you probably know. So I have to like pause and say, no, I got to stay on track here. But it's sponsored by the State Department's Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs, which and administered by IIE, which is Institute of International Education, which is who Kyle represents through both Bourne as well as a host of other scholarships and fellowships, and administered by overseas by sort of commissions and and U.S. embassies. So there's a good relationship between your sort of State Department type entities that are located in other countries and the work that you'll be doing. So a lot of folks will say like you're an ambassador for the United States in said country, and I'll get to the country I went to in a little bit. Okay, the thing that I always like to talk about at the outset is diversity and inclusion. So from a personal aspect, I work the diversity, equity, inclusion portfolio for our secretary. So that's just a general passion of mine. But in Fulbright terms, there are a lot of links to it. And what I would say is that as student veterans, and as veterans overall, we normally look at demographic representation when it comes to diversity, right? So we say your typical race, ethnicity, gender, right? And you started to see a lot of work around military spouses, the inclusion of military spouses as your sort of demographic diversity, as well as veterans, right? And so there's a lot of work, I think, being done on the national stage around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I think it ties directly to what Fulbright's trying to promote, which is really trying to open up these opportunities to all different backgrounds, because we do understand that diversity is a strength. And if you aren't bringing your personal and unique stories that you had, like a kid from South Carolina who grew up in bankruptcy, right, in a single parent household, right? Those are the type of unique experiences. When you bring those to a country like, which I will get to, which is a country like Canada, right? Like that is going to be a very different experience than someone else who goes and pursues a Fulbright in Canada. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of those, just an important component of the Fulbright program. What I'll do is I'll actually pause right now because I could talk. So I'll pause for questions. Do we have any questions just at the outset before I move through? Nothing? All right, we're good. Awesome. Fullbright U.S. student eligibility. This is where, I wish we could have some research on this, but I've always felt that this is where veterans actually stop looking past opportunities like this, right? Because we're like, hey, we transition and we're a little older than your normal student, profile. So we're like, we don't want to do that. That's for younger folks. We might look at the fact that, so you have to have your bachelor's degree or equivalent, right, start of grant. So we might be in our sophomore year and we're dealing with a bunch of other things. We're trying to get our disability claims done. We're trying to get this done. We're trying to set up stuff at the SVA chapter, the local chapter. We've got a lot of stuff going on. So we're like, let's kind of put that off a little bit. Sometimes we never get back to it, right? Like, and I'm guilty of it because I did it, quite frankly. And some of the basic eligibility points, no doctorate at the time of application. You could be a PhD candidate, but you can't have completed your doctorate by the time you've started working through this program. Country-specific requirements. Each country, there are about 140 countries that are accepting of Fullbright applicants, right? So they have some sort of entity in the said country, in the country you would go to. And you're able to kind of pursue those Fullbright opportunities there, but each country has its unique requirements. So that's where we'll kind of point you to the actual website itself, where it does actually a really good job of going country by country and showing a lot of those requirements that are unique to you, and that's going to impact your eligibility. Okay. All right. Those are some of the just high-level sort of numbers there. I'm a numbers person as well, so like I'm all evidence-based. So it's like if I don't see like high numbers, like 2,200 plus awards, then I'm gonna be like, I'm probably not gonna do it, right? Like I might self-select out. I will tell you that in these types of opportunities, you're kind of gonna go out on a limb. You're gonna design a project. You're not really gonna know everything about where you want to go and what you want to do, but you kind of got to just continue to develop it, and hopefully with someone like myself who's a Fullbright alumni ambassador who helps Fullbrights pursue Fullbright opportunities, then you can continue to work with someone like that to develop it. There are two components of the Fullbright grant, though. So most people hear Fullbright scholarship and they think like, that's a lot going on. They're like, I hear some people teaching English in Malaysia. Then I hear some person who went to Canada and did a Fullbright. There are really two sort of components of it. One is that top part there. Is there a laser on here? No, there's no laser. All right. Oh, there is. Big green button. All right. So the first one is, actually, I'll start at the bottom. The first one is the English teaching assistantship. This is actually, when I was approached about Fullbright, like initially, a really good friend of mine did one. He went to Turkey, and he was teaching English as a second language in Turkey. This is what I was always familiar with, was ETA. Like that's like the no-brainer. You go, you want a cultural immersion. You go to another country. You're bringing a lot of the skills that you have as a student veteran, as a American citizen, doing whatever it is that you're interested in. You bring that to that country, and you also teach students English as a second language. You also design other types of projects around what you want to accomplish in that country, right? So that's what I've always been familiar with. And this is an opportunity. This is not what I did, though. I did the study research grant. And this may be a little bit more sort of fitting to a lot of the interests that I just can think of as student veterans typically have. You want to pursue a research interest. You want to develop the things that you've worked on. My background was in national security and foreign policy. I'm like an American foreign policy. That's my baby, right? And I wanted to figure out how to go to another country, use a lot of those skills, and carry out a very unique project. My project was on the state of Canada-U.S. relations during the last presidential administration. That was my That was my research project. So I looked at Canadian strategic culture. I looked at how Canada manages itself as a middle power during the rise of China and during the last administration. How does it manage itself? Very geopolitical type work. But there are also other types of works, right? Like I've heard folks doing Arctic research. I had friends who were doing like a lot of environmental related research. There are also Fullbright grants that are dedicated around storytelling, and there's a National Geographic like Fullbright opportunity that's far different from the sort of geopolitical work that I wanted to do, right? So a lot of it's going to be country dependent, and a lot of it's going to be based off of your interest as well. But that's the one I did. All right, we'll move. Okay, there's me. Okay, so let's the top left here just speaks a little bit about what the type of program was, right? So it was the U.S. Study Fullbright Research Grant, and my topic for my research project was a wedged middle power, right? So Canada's manages itself as this power transition is happening. How does Canada really do that? Like, yeah, go ahead. Please, yes. I love questions.
I was wondering, I was wondering how you came up with your topic, and what's a good way for us to research to create that topic that will make us a competitive candidate for this scholarship?
Thank you for that question. The first, I will say two things. The first is, based off of your interests, mine was American foreign policy. I said, what institutions across Canada have a specialty around Canadian-American relations or Canada-U.S. foreign policy? And then I actually did a lot of cold calling and cold emails out to research professors that were in the country that you want to go to. And there's a whole thing that we can talk about, and we could talk offline and others, but it's called affiliation letters, where you have to sort of, you are designing this project and you don't know much about it, so you're now reaching out to, could be think tanks, could be research institutes in the country, could be professors, and you're starting to design that, and then you're also sending that out to them so that they can review it and edit it. And then you're working also with your campus folks, because on campus there's usually a Fullbright Program advisor or some sort of fellowships some sort of scholarships and fellowships office. You can work with them, and specifically a Fullbright Program advisor, to help you shape that project and potentially even connect you with folks to help you. So that's what I do now as an alumni ambassador. People want to go to Canada. I'm like, okay, here's this person, here's this person, here's this person. And then I send emails, and then they, and then now you can take it from there and start to develop and get sort of educated. Yeah, definitely. Anything else? All right. Awesome. Great question. Okay, so those are some of the things that I had the opportunity to do. So, this was a year-long program, right, which is really 9 months, but I extended it out additional months because I loved Kingston, Ontario, Canada, which is the first capital of Canada. I loved Ottawa. I loved Toronto. I kind of lived this nomadic, just traveling through Ontario lifestyle for the better part of a year. And then I spent a lot of time in Toronto because it was nice and warm, and it's just a beautiful city. But you get to sort of carry out this, you get to carry out this very unique project, and you get to design it too. I was a writer for Conversation Canada, so I started writing op-eds, which was something that I've always wanted to do, and actually had the opportunity to do that. And I worked as a visiting fellow for a think tank where I would go and give presentations all across around the rise of China and power transition theory and all these, very, very nerdy sort of political science things, but loved it. What I would do is, I want to hit here because I want to be mindful of time. The tips and the now, that's really what I want to talk about. Then we're going to go through the other slides, but I want to hit this really hard. Okay, so as you start to look at your, pursuing a Fullbright opportunity, your service, That's the first thing I would say. So think of your service, think of your time in uniform or your time as a, military-connected individual, right? Military spouses, families, the whole thing, and really start to, internalize that and say, what did I learn from my time in service, right? Like, what did I learn about me? What did I hate? What is that thing I want to improve that I really didn't like about my time in service? One thing that I learned as an intelligence officer is that we spend so much time researching our, threat nations, right? Like, we have all these threat pictures, like everything. I know all about air defense systems, SAMs, the whole thing, right? But how much do I know about my allies? I spent so much time as an intel officer learning about threats. I didn't know anything about our allies. So I said, okay, well, let me try to design a project around learning about our allies. And our closest ally, which we share a 5,500-mile border with, which is Canada. And so, okay, let's go to the next thing here. Essay. You really have to, for your essay, you are designing really two essays. One is a personal statement, and this is going to vary by country, but this is what I did. You have a personal statement, then you have a statement of grant purpose. Your personal statement is really going to, internalize you, and that's where you start talking about your service, and you start talking about your upbringing and your background, and what makes you the best person, a unique candidate profile for this opportunity. And then you have your statement of grant purpose where you're developing that research project, right? So that's where you're connecting with research institutes, think tanks, professors, and you're really developing, saying, this is what I want to do when I get into country. I want to meet, defense and foreign policy makers in Ottawa. This is how I will do it. You really outline it. And it's 2 pages, it's single space. It's daunting. I'm not going to lie. It's like, it takes a lot of work. But I'll tell you, I started mine late, and I finished mine from start to finish in 2 months. Now, I would not suggest that because I stayed up. I did a lot of staying all the way up throughout the night, crunching it out, making it better. But you can do it. So don't even think that time is all that. Put the work in, much like you did when you were in uniform, and put forth a meaningful project, one that you can say that you're happy about. All right. Third, be realistic but be creative. There are a lot of, my initial Fullbright project was, I am going to go to Quebec and I'm going to learn how to speak French. That was what I said. I don't have time. I didn't have time for that. Over the course of a year, I wanted to, so you have to start to look at those things that you really, really want to do, and then those other things that are just nice to have. And I said, no, I actually would like to just be a visiting fellow, conduct a lot of research, and get a master's degree. That's what I wanted to do, not go learn another language, because it's just not realistic. And when folks are reviewing that, it comes off as, man, you're just trying to dump a bunch in there. You have to really be focused when you're working through these opportunities. The fourth is future and what's next. So this is where you're focusing on how your experience in the service, your experience as a student veteran, your experience, starting up a local organization or community service, how does that inform what you want to do next? If you want to be a foreign service officer, then, Fullbright, there's a very clear link between Fullbright and that. If you want to go and, be a professor down the line, or maybe you want to go and pursue a PhD, you would design and speak to that in a way that says, this will inform me as I go forward doing a PhD. Because you were doing an intensive research project for a year. So you could probably make a strong case that you are doing a very mini-sized version of a PhD, or at least some components of PhD. Okay, so those are some of the tips that I would provide, and then the bottom right there, that's a picture that I really, really love, because that was during Black History Month when I was a brand new political appointee, and there was all these Black appointees. But the thing that I think is the biggest takeaway between that picture, the now at the intersection of both of those things, is that when you are awarded certain things like Fullbright, it is a unique identifier. It's one of those things that when someone looks on a resume and they see Fullbright, they say, okay, you know, if they don't know about it, then they've heard about it. They might have heard about it by watching West Wing because Josh Lyman was a Fulbrighter, right? Like, or they may have just been familiar with the Fullbright program, and it's that thing that stands out a little bit. As someone who I review resumes and recruit folks to come in to work in the administration at the Department of Veterans Affairs, I look at resumes all the time. I interview folks a lot. And I look for those unique identifiers. It's not gonna say, you know, it's not gonna say that you don't have one now. I'm not gonna have a conversation with you, but it is the thing that says, I definitely want to get to know about that person, right? Like I definitely, even if they're eventually not gonna go forward with anything, but the Fullbright program provides, and the Fullbright scholarship not only provides that practical experience, but it also provides that sort of surface level unique identifier. So, all right, let's move through here. Okay, so here are some of the award benefits, and what is our stop time? Because I definitely, what is our final time? Is it 12:05? Oh, 12:20. 12:20. Okay. All right. So here are some of the award benefits, pre and post grant. You know, so for your pre-grant, like you are provided that round trip fare, so you're flying from wherever you are. For me, I was in Hampton Roads area, and I flew to Canada. And then you are also afforded a monthly stipend. And as veterans, I'm going to hit the pre-grant the most here, a little bit on the post-grant, but as student veterans, we are in a unique opportunity, right? Like we have incomes for the most part, or at least we have the post 9/11 bill. We might have voc rehab, or VRNE as it's now called, or we are service-connected disabled, and we are able to have a lot of that income coming in that you think of your traditional student profile, they just don't have, right? So a lot of them are just trying to figure out how to, like, you know, pay the rent and like eat. Whereas we have a little bit more. Now we have other things, like we have to pay bills and we have kids and, like, you know, but if you know, just think through it a little bit, because there are certain things that we have as far as, like, I would say some relative financial stability that could enable us to really take advantage of this program. The monthly stipend for me, it was I believe mine was $15,000 US over the course of a year. That was given in 3 installments, but I used that to pay for my tuition. So pay for my tuition at Queen's University, and that's what I did. All right, so all right, let's move on down. Other possible benefits: support for dependents, which I'm actually gonna kick to Kyle because I don't know much about the support for dependents, if you know. And then you have research allowance tuition. There is also a critical language component of some Fulbright scholarship opportunities where you can go and learn a language, right? So, you know, in Bourne Awards, you'll talk to you a lot about language learning and a lot about immersion into a country, but the Fulbright does provide a sort of host of other possible benefits. And then, so we'll move from pre-grant to post-grant. There are things that you are exposed to, right? So after you're done with your Fulbright scholarship, you have 12 months of non-competitive eligibility. NCE, is everyone familiar with non-competitive eligibility? Okay. You are, okay. So this is what so for non-competitive eligibility, and I work very closely with this now, when you apply for a federal job, so you go to USA Jobs, and there's a host of federal jobs there, you can click a button, and you can upload, you know, so you usually have some sort of documentation, and that says that you are able to get special hiring preference and added points when you are competing for a federal job. That's what non-competitive eligibility is. And so, you know, if you think of it, your service-connected, you know, ness, right? As a veteran, you get veterans preference. Folks are familiar with that. But you also get the non-competitive eligibility requirement as well, right? So those are the special hiring authorities in the federal government. Lifetime Fulbright email address, and then Fulbright Association, which is just this large network of alumni that are just doing all kinds of things across the spectrum. I recently went to the Fullbright the U.S. Fullbright 75th anniversary, and I was actually in the video, and it's like you're meeting all these people who are Fulbrighters, and it's just this massive network of folks who are in music, who are in education, who are in environmental affairs, who are in political science and foreign affairs, just across the spectrum of Fulbright type folks, Fulbrighters. So I'll pause there for questions. And I wish I had some coffee too. I'm thirsty. No, I had to get some. Okay, here are your application components. I spoke a little bit about this. Won't belabor one because I think that kind of makes a lot of sense there. Number two, I spoke about the statement of grant purpose and you really developing what you want to accomplish when you're in the country. For me in Canada, I wanted to do, again, I told you those very specific. I wanted to get a degree. I wanted to do research as a visiting fellow. I wanted to sort of get immersed in the policy making in Ottawa specifically. And then you will sort of tack on some sort of community focused work as well. So I did a little bit of work there around sort of military, I guess you would call it like military families research in Kingston specifically, because they have a think tank there. So I worked with a lot of those folks and actually got to like touch some veterans issues a little bit, right? Like I didn't really have as much time, but like these are the types of things that you really sort of put into your Fulbright project and your statement of grant purpose, so that they can see that you're going to do meaningful work in that country. All right, report. I talked about personal statement and the importance of that. All right, we move to bullet 3 there, which is reports and references. Okay, so I do want to spend a second on this and the 5th point there. So in certain countries, so I said 140 countries, some countries have they have requirements where you have to know a foreign language, right? So like you have to go to that country, you have to have a foreign language expert, certain level of foreign language expertise. Then you have other Fulbright opportunities within the Fullbright U.S. student program and the English teaching assistantship, where you don't have to have that foreign language expertise. There's a whole list like Canada, New Zealand, Australia, UK. I can't remember the rest, but like those are some of the ones where you speak English, you can go there. And then some you have to have a certain degree of proficiency. You also have your 3 references, right? So, and this is the thing that I really want to talk about, because not a lot of folks talk about where to get your recommendations and your references from when you're pursuing these types of opportunities. For me, I wanted someone to attest to, because Fulbright is so much about community and sort of community immersion once you get into country, I wanted someone to be able to speak to my community-focused work that I've done in the States. Because I wanted to conduct a research project like U.S.-Canada relations, a very complex one, I wanted someone who was a professor who could speak to that element of it. And then the third one was really my military profile. So I had actually had a 2-for-1 where I had a professor who was also a military, former military commander, and he spoke to the military side of me. So I was able to blend all those 3 things together and have different aspects of my profile that were spoken to through recommendation. So, and then you have your campus committee evaluation. That's a process where each campus has the ability to sort of interview, screen, put and figure out, which Fulbright applicants will go up and will be sort of sponsored by that university. Some Fulbrighters go up as, sponsored by a specific university. Some are sort of out of, what do they call it? Out of country? Out of what? At large, yeah, at large. So it's like an at-large application where you're not affiliated with a particular institution putting your Fulbright application in, but you could still be very, very competitive, right? Like there's not really a one-up, from having the thing about the campus committee evaluation, if you do choose to go that route, which is to have someone help you and assist you through your university Fullbright program advisor and fellowships office. They will help you refine a lot of your projects. So that's real value add there. Is like they will tell you, like, you know, I'll hook you up with a Fulbrighter who's done this before. Let me help them. They can help you shape the work that you want to do in that country. Yeah, go ahead.
You touched on a good point, and I was just curious, when you were coming up with your statement of grant purpose for your research, who did you talk to refine it, kick ideas around, and just go, does this make sense?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it speaks a little bit about sort of your question, and it's funny, I get this one a lot. What I would say is that so if you can sort of cobble together what you want to do, and then you could hit the mastery of Google, and you can find, again, professors that are already doing this type of work. They could be in the States, they could be in the country you want to go to, doesn't matter. Find them. You could use LinkedIn to find them. I did cold email. I also called, and I finally got to one professor, because after you send off 7 or 8 emails, you get to one professor that's literally the one who's going to just open you up to everybody. And that's what happened. Stephanie von Halaki, she was the director, the executive director of the think tank that I worked. And I got in touch with her. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be a Fulbrighter in Canada. I want to do this work. And she said, okay, you want to work on strategic culture? Let me connect you to David Hagelin. Let me connect you to, like, Adam Sand. Christopher Sands. Let me connect you. Like, it just opened up from there. So that's when you're going to kick it to them. After you've cobbled together a project, a statement of grant purpose, you kick it to them, and then they will destroy you because they will say, that's not right, do this, maybe you want to look here, maybe you want to look at this, maybe you should read this, you know, and then you start, that's the real art behind the Fulbright. That's the challenging and interesting part about Fulbright program for me, is that you are getting all of this, like, just like this firsthand sort of grassroots experience in how to develop a project. And people are going to say, like, that's not too right. And I know, because I've been working on it for 30 years, and that's okay. It's okay. It helps you get a lot stronger once you get in country. Thank you. All right. Okay. All right, we'll move here. So this is just an example of sort of what your application timeline would look like, some of the factors in selection. One of the things that I like to, as I was talking with Kyle yesterday, is that there is veterans preference in this factors in selection. So keep that in mind when you're applying for it. They are going to look at certain characteristics of candidate profiles, and they're going to sort of say, okay, this can be interesting. Let's actually put them in the pool for consideration. It's very important to be able to, I would say, you know, make it known that you're a veteran, right? Like, make it known. All right. Okay, let's go through. Okay, and these are ways to stay connected with us all throughout. And what I'll do is, if anyone, I'll give you my LinkedIn. If we all could, I think we can do some little scanning with the QR code here, and you can get my information, as well as find any time to be able to contact me and talk you through the Fullbright scholarship, because I think it is an amazing opportunity. We need more student veterans to pursue these types of opportunities, and I will say that I jokingly, I'm the veteran that everyone comes to at the Fullbright program saying, hey, can you do this, can you do this, and we need more of you, so that y'all can join us. So thank you. And I'll kick it over, what I'll do now is I'll kick it over to Kyle. Kyle will speak from IIE. He'll speak about Bourne Awards. Over to you, Kyle.
Thank you so much, Jimmy, for sharing some of your time with me for me to talk about the Bourne Awards. Before I do that, though, I do want to harp on something that he said right at the end of his presentation about needing more veterans with that veteran preference for the Fullbright program. I myself, in my work at IIE, I get to sit on a selection panels for a number of awards. And this past fall, I got to sit on maybe 4 or 5 panels to facilitate panels for Fullbright. And with their Fullbright preference for veterans, we looked over maybe 250, 260 applications and had 1 veteran in those applications. So, just saying. But we at the Institute of International Education, we call ourselves the power behind international education. That's our slogan, and that sounds a little pretentious, but that's really who we are. We are all about facilitating opportunities for the exchange of ideas across borders. We've been around for around 102 years now, doing everything from collecting data. We work with the Department of State, who is the sponsor for the Fullbright program, to collect what we call the Open Doors Report, where we collect general trends in study abroad around the world. We work with different institutions to promote and lobby for study abroad in various countries. And specifically today, we administer over 250 different scholarships, fellowships, grants for overseas study, both sending Americans overseas and bringing foreign scholars to the US, including our Scholar Rescue Fund, which is kind of our gem. It's one that we really care about, helping scholars in distressed places escape their war-torn or disasters-devastated countries and come to the United States where it's safe to continue their work. I today am coming to you as a representative of the Bourne Awards. The Bourne Awards, like Fullbright, is a government-sponsored program, but this one funded by the Department of Defense. Back in 1991, an act of Congress was passed to create the National Security and Education Program Initiative to set aside some DoD funding to encourage American students to go overseas and learn languages that aren't quite as commonly taught here in the United States. Americans do study abroad, but we often go to really popular destinations, Western Europe, for example. And it was decided to be a good idea to incentivize Americans to go to less commonly visited destinations, learn languages that aren't quite as commonly taught here on domestic campuses. And so that's where Bourne got its funding as part of that act of Congress, and that's still our purpose today. That emphasis on going overseas, immersing yourself in a language, in the culture in which it is spoken, and then most importantly, especially for veteran students like yourselves, coming back from that time overseas with an interest in using those skills and your experiences in something that's related to public service as it specifically relates to national security. I myself was not a Bourne. I love listening to alums like Jimmy talk because they can give you a personal experience. My knowledge of Bourne is all academic. Lots of universities, campuses have their own designated campus reps, a go-to person for you to talk to about your Bourne application. Our campus rep, I took 3 classes from the guy and he never mentioned it. Once I started working for the Bourne, I got ready to fire off a really angry letter. How dare you? But I was not a Bourne myself, but it does give me some joy to share this opportunity with all of you who can take advantage of Bourne. Now, what are we specifically? As I mentioned before, we offer scholarships and fellowships for overseas study. So that's undergraduate awards, that's our scholarships. Fellowships, that's our graduate awards. So if you are still working on your bachelor's or even your associates, or if you're advanced level studies, master's, PhD, Juris Doctorate, something of that nature, you're still eligible for Bourne funding for your time overseas. Maximum awards of $25,000 for your time abroad. I do have to mention that we do rate your funding with the amount of time that you're overseas. So the shortest amount of time most students can apply for is 12 weeks. We have a strong preference for students who are going 12 months, though. We want you to be overseas for as long as possible, really immersing yourself in that language, right? Because, the longer you're there, the better for your language gains, obviously. So while you could go for a shorter period of time, that would then be less money. Anyone going for 12 to 24 weeks is $12,500. For anyone going that 25 weeks or more, you're now eligible for that full $25,000. Any STEM students in the audience? STEM undergraduate students can actually go for even shorter periods of time. We recognize that it can be hard for STEM students to go abroad and do study abroad. You've got strict on-campus commitments, and so for STEM undergraduate students, you can do 8 to 11 weeks, typically during the summer, for up to $8,000. But for everyone else, the minimum is 12 weeks. Again, with a preference for students who are going much longer. For our scholarships, I believe it's like 75% of our award recipients are going for the 25 weeks or more. For the fellowships, it's more like 85, 90% who are doing like long-term overseas study. As I mentioned before, we have a strong preference for less commonly spoken languages and less commonly visited destinations. On our long list of countries that we would encourage you to go, long list of countries that we prefer for you to apply for, go to our website, bourneawards.org, and you'll see a map with all of our countries and preferred study abroad destinations. The United States is a no, that's not a study abroad destination. We mostly speak English. I'm so sorry, Jimmy. We also don't do Canada because they mostly speak English. You can't go to Australia because the wildlife is terrifying and they mostly speak English. You also can't do Western Europe. And Western Europe, it's just too popular. As I mentioned before, too many Americans go into Western Europe. Not really a critical need for more of those languages. But Urdu, Swahili, Arabic is huge for us. Japanese, Korean is increasing every year that I've worked with Bourne. Russian, lots of countries where you can do Russian. There's so many languages, lots of indigenous languages as well, that you could propose for Bourne-funded study. We do have, and this is really important, a strong emphasis on U.S. national security and public service. We're looking for students who have an interest in working for the federal government and committing a significant portion of their professional career to something that's relevant to U.S. national security. That's basically the return on investment for this time overseas, that study and then coming back and putting your skills to work in some way that's relevant to U.S. national security. In fact, there's actually a service requirement for the Bourne Awards that you come back from your time overseas and work for the government in something national security related for at least 12 months, at least 1 year. Now let me unpack that. When we say it has to be national security related, national security incredibly broadly defined. We have a really open understanding of what's relevant to US national security. I get a lot of students who are like, oh, so you're trying to put me back on the front lines, or you're trying to make me a spy. Not necessarily true, although, I mean, you can definitely go into the intelligence community if you want to. But a few years ago, I got to meet a Bourne who had gone to South Africa as part of her PhD work. She studied infectious disease while learning Zulu and is now working for an infectious disease organization. What could be more national security relevant in this current age than an expert who went overseas and studied infectious disease? If you're an individual who's thinking cybersecurity, immigration issues, people migration across borders, environmental protection issues, there's so many different ways to interpret national security, and it's really on you to pick something, ideally that's related to your current field of study, and articulate how you can learn more about that issue in that overseas location. Then when you come back, and this is going to be key to your application, you need to have a plan in mind, some idea for where you can work on that issue within the federal government. We have a priority for individuals who are thinking either DOD, the Department of State, so Foreign Service Officer, which is the direction a lot of Fulbrighters go, the intelligence community, or Homeland Security. Those are the ones that we really prioritize. But we've also had Bournes fulfill their service in Commerce, Treasury, Environmental Protection Agency. One of my favorite stories is a guy who went overseas. I think he went to Kazakhstan to do Russian, came back as a lawyer working for NASA. And and he helps with their relationships with Russian-speaking countries. And that meets his service requirements. So there are lots of different ways to interpret service. You just need to have a plan in mind that you can articulate in your application. And that goes then to the last bullet on that slide, that preferential consideration for federal government careers. As I said before, we have a service requirement of 12 months. but we're looking for individuals who are thinking 12 years. Like, all we will ask of you is 12 months, but it definitely strengthens your application to demonstrate that long-term interest in government service. Who's eligible to apply? You must be a US citizen. You must be planning to study a foreign language in an eligible world region. Lots of preferred languages, lots of preferred regions. You must be, this is key, you must be matriculated at a US institution for the duration of your time overseas. Lots of syllables there. That just means you must still be a student in a degree-seeking program for the duration of your time abroad. You can't do Bourne as like a gap year between undergrad or grad student. You can't do like after you've already graduated from your grad degree. You must still be a student while you are abroad. If you have some sort of issue with how to make that work, definitely want to get my contact information. I can tell you how some students have gone around it. Also, as I mentioned before, most campuses have a Bourne campus rep, someone who's fairly familiar with this process. They can tell you if students from your university have had to finagle their graduation dates, whatever, in order to stay a Bourne. And then you cannot be a citizen of the destination country. So if you wanted to do, I don't know, I mentioned Korean, super popular. If you wanted to do Korean, you could not also have Korean citizenship while you're abroad. There's two basic formats for our awards. As I mentioned before, there's scholarships and fellowships, so undergraduate and graduate awards. We also have what you would call self-identified programs, or our flagship language initiatives. Self-identified is literally that. And this is one of the best things about Bourne, in that there's a lot of flexibility here for a lot of countries. You find the program that makes the most sense for you. You determine how long you'll be in country. All of the factors of your Bourne-funded study are on you. Bourne is just paying for it. So if you want to find your own research opportunity or an internship while you're overseas where you could still learn the language while you're pursuing those other interests, that would be a self-identified study. Or if you just want to go to a particular institute to learn the language and focus on learning the language at this particular university, we're not going to force you, for most awards, to go to any particular institution. It's on you to find a program that makes the most sense for you. And a lot of people like Bourne for that flexibility. If you don't want to do the work of finding a program, we do have some pre-arranged programs that we've worked with partners here in the United States as well as partners overseas to craft a specific study of particular languages. There's the African Flagship Language Initiative for AFLI, or we call it AFLI, for Swahili, French, Akan, Chi, Wolof, and Zulu. For these, we have specific locations overseas where you'll go to a specific program after going to an institute here in the United States for the summer. In the case of AFLI, it's the University of Florida. Oh, right, it's up in Gainesville. For the South Asian Flagship Language Initiative, the languages are Hindi and Urdu in Lucknow and Jaipur. For the fall, IFLI is Indonesian in Malang, Indonesia. Turfli is not in Turkey. It's in Baku, Azerbaijan. Security reasons, we're not sending anyone to Turkey right now, but you'll still get great immersion to Turkish in Baku during the fall. For the SAFLI, IFLI, and TURFLI, the summer domestic program is at the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. So you'll go to the set domestic location for the summer. You then immediately go overseas to an institution that we've picked out for the fall for those particular languages under the AFLI, SAFLI, IFLI, and TURFLI. So those are the two basic formats, either self-identified, where you find a program that makes sense to you, or for any of those specific flagship language initiatives, or FLEs, because it's much easier to say, a program that we've already arranged. Our application deadline is right around the corner. It might be a little soon to put in an application for this year, but this will be the general time for applications next year. There's one application cycle every year, and if you want to get an early start on your application for next year, it's never too early, honestly, to start thinking about your applications. The entire application is online. Of course, we'll need your basic biographical information, but you'll also need to work on 2 essays, and the essays are really what make or break your application. Essay 1 is where you articulate your national security issue and argument. Here's where you start talking about a thing that you're interested in as it relates to your studies and as it relates to the overseas destination. If you're interested in, I don't know, Arabic and migration of people across borders, say why Jordan has a major refugee crisis and why you want to go to Jordan. This is how you articulate that in Essay 1. Essay 2 is where you then start going into your plans for long-term government employment. Here's where you start name-dropping agencies and roles where you're interested in fulfilling your service and the tools and experiences that you bring to those roles. Those essays, they take time. 800 words per essay, and they do take time. You're going to want to make like 5 or 6 drafts, and as Jimmy was mentioning, when you're coming up with a grant purpose for Fullbright, you're also going to want to think through like talking to professors, talking to people at your university who can help you really hone in on a credible national security concern and a realistic path for federal employment. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, we have this requirement that you do service. We really don't like to talk about it as a requirement. It's more of an opportunity because we have a lot of resources similar to Fullbright. Actually, I think ours are better to help you with that job search on the back end. For example, Jimmy had talked about non-competitive eligibility status, where you can maintain that additional assistance for, it was a year. Ours is until you finish your service, like until you finish your commitment to us. So ours actually lasts even longer. Our sponsors at the DoD, the National Security Education Program, they have their own job board, NCEP.net, that you'll have access to after you've come back. So much easier than going on USA Jobs, going on NCEP.net. And there'll be positions that are up on NCEP.net that are exclusive to Bournes, like only Bournes need apply. We have one big event. It used to be in December, back when gathering together was a regularly occurring thing. Now it's been all virtual, but we have a hiring fair where, similar to the campus, we bring in dozens of government agencies, and you can walk around with your resume and try to make contacts there in the room in person. Lots of assistance to help you with that job search. We want you to be able to fulfill your service, and so our sponsors at the DoD are going to really try to hold your hand as much as possible to make sure that you're able to find a position that works for you. So we call it a requirement, but it's really a tremendous opportunity if you're thinking about careers in public service. Last slide should be our contact us. Yeah. Technically, Bourne is headquartered down in DC or up in DC where the DoD can keep their eye on us. I'm one of the rogues out in our New York office. I don't fight about it. Feel free to write us an email, bourne@iie.org. There's 4 or 5 of us who check the inbox. We'll get back to you with a nice, thorough response. If you want to give us a call, 1-800-618-NCEP. That rings 5 or 6 different phones, including one sitting there on that chair. So if you're going to call to complain about this presentation, don't, because I answer the phones. Bourneawards.org. That's our website, and I joke that our website has way too much information on it. If you want to hear like a full 1-hour version of this presentation, we've got it all chopped up in different bits on our website and pre-recorded webinars. Everything you need to know about how to put forward a competitive application, how to write your essays. If you're ROTC cadet or midshipman, we've got specific webinars for you. Lots of information up on our website. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube. We're everywhere but Snapchat and TikTok because we're too old and we don't dance. Any questions for Jimmy and I before we wrap up this time together? Yeah, please, come to the mic.
You say that there needed to be a language requirement. Would that be an official one? Because mine has already been required. I mean, been satisfied at before I went into the military. And so, like, for instance, if we're going over to a country and we want to learn like Farsi, but we already had like, say, like Spanish or sign language or something on that matter, and so.
This is a really great question, and I'm glad you asked, because this is, I sped past it, but there's a lot that I can elaborate on this, so I'm glad you asked. When we say that you need to have focus on learning a language, we really do mean that. Learning a language needs to be like the core element of your time overseas. This should be your primary focus. Gaining proficiency in a language while you are abroad. You can do research, but it needs to be clear that you're doing research is like tied into learning the language. Or you can do an internship, But again, it needs to be clear that your main focus is learning a language. Now, for the vast majority of languages, you can come in at any level of proficiency. You can come in at beginner, novice, never spoke a word of the language before. That's fine. We just need to see your plan, your proposal for how you're going to improve in those language skills. How are you going to get to a higher degree of proficiency in your language skills while you are abroad? Same would be true if you've already had plenty of experience speaking the language. Say you're already intermediate or advanced. Tell us this is where you are now in your language skills, but maybe your professional vernacular in your particular field or profession could use some work, and you're going to this internship to work on your professional speaking abilities, or some way you're a heritage speaker and you grew up speaking the language at home, but maybe your grammar is not great, or you're not good at writing official communication in the language. We need to see your plan on how you're going to improve in your language skills while you are abroad. If you're switching languages, that's also great. Like, we don't mind someone who has a ton of proficiency in Spanish now saying that they want to do Arabic. We still need to see that clear plan on how you're going to improve in your language skills. And do let us know that you have prior experience speaking the language, because let's be honest, learning language is a skill all by itself, even if it's not the language that you're planning to study. So do let us know that you have that prior experience speaking the language. It adds some credibility and feasibility to your proposal. Did I answer your question? Great. Thank you for asking. That was a good question. I did need to elaborate on that. Any other questions? Please.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm from Texas Christian University, and I actually had a question for Jimmy about the opportunities through Congress or something related to that. Are those within the country, or are those abroad as well?
Which opportunities again?
I think you mentioned something about for Congress and something in the political realm.
Yeah, so no, those would be more of, so those wouldn't be within the Fulbright, process or after, but they will help you if you're trying to navigate into like a job on Capitol Hill or something. Is that what you're trying to?
Yes.
Yeah, so it will help you navigate that. First from your network, because there's so many people within the net. We have Fulbrighters in Congress. We have Fulbrighters kind of all over the place, and they will see that and see that as a sort of that, like I said, that unique identifier. And then when you put in for your, if you want to put in, maybe not a job on the Hill, but definitely if you were putting in USA jobs, that non-competitive eligibility really is like. I mean, it's the way it's designed is to be sort of a fast track for you to get into the federal government. It's not a guarantee, but it does get you around all the USA jobs, federal government jobs, sort of nightmare, quite frankly, that it becomes. And so it gets you past that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Definitely.
Appreciate it.
And we'll talk more about it.
All right, sounds good.
Anything else? And I know we're at over time, so I know we've got 12:20. Anything else? Going once, going twice? All right. Thank you all again. Really appreciate y'all's time. Please feel free to connect with either one of us if you have any further questions. Thank you all. Have a good one.